on, you. Come on, kitty, 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 kitty. Come on, kitty, 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 kitty. Here, kitty, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, 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 kitty. That time I got ya. That time we got ya. Yep. Oopsie. Easy does it there, big guy. Easy does it, big guy. Stop it. Oh. It fell out right when I picked it up.
Nice.
Finally. Look at what we got. Hit the button. Look at what we got. There you go. Alrighty, fishy. He did want to come play. There he goes.
Hey folks, Glenn May here with BassResource.com, and today I want to talk about the top 10 myths and misconceptions about spawning bass. There's a lot of stories that go around, and so I want to help clear up some of those and help you become more successful as a result. So the first one I want to talk about is that bass are really easy to catch during the spawn. You know, it's funny, I hear this a lot, and when I ask the guy who mentioned that, like, okay, what's the secret then to catching them so much, and what makes it so easy? And almost always the response is, well, I don't fish for spawning bass because that's unethical. You know, that's just like shooting chicken in a barrel, and I don't think that's right to do during the spawn. So the reality is that they actually don't fish for bedding bass. So usually, typically people who say it's really easy to fish just haven't tried fishing for spawning bass. Now, ethics aside, and let me just hit that real quick. I do fish for bedding bass, but it's only for sport. When I do catch them, I release them immediately. I don't keep them at all, and I encourage you to do that. Let them finish doing their thing if you're going to catch them off a bed. So, enough about that. But with catching them off beds requires a lot of patience, a lot of experience, and powers of observation to be able to be successful. It's not that easy. Spawning bass, what I've discovered with these is that it's kind of like if you've had pets, you've either had cats or dogs, horses, what have you, and even if you have the same breed, say for example a golden retriever or a Labrador, one after another, each of them have their own personality quirks, their likes and dislikes. Cats, some love to chase that laser dot on the wall, others don't care for it at all, right? Horses, they like one kind of food, not the other. I had one horse that loved plums. I don't know why. Other horses wouldn't touch them, but he loved plums. They're all different. And the point is that if animals have their different quirks and personalities, there's no sense in thinking that why can't creatures underwater be the same way? And I've learned this with bass that are on beds. What may trigger a bite from one bass on a bed, the other won't care for. It may scare them off. The exact same presentation. So you have to learn for each bed that you're on, that nuance, that little thing that's going to trigger that bass to bite. It's a matter of inches of where you place that bait, but it's also what your presentation is and what's going to get them to bite. Some fish want something that's barely moving, something that looks vulnerable. Other fish, you need to whack them upside the head with it and threaten them with that lure for them to strike it. So it's not an easy thing. Fishing for spawning bass is not easy. All right, the next misconception I want to talk about is if you catch the male off the bed, then the female's going to be a lot easier to catch. Yeah, that's not the case. So the female is there because the male is there. She's there to spawn. There's no other reason she's going to be hanging around in that area if there isn't a bed and a male there to attract her. If you remove him, then there's no reason for her to hang around any longer. Yeah, I see where this misconception comes from because males are more aggressive, and if you're trying to catch a female and the male goes in there and keeps hitting the lure, you know, it's hard to catch her. So it stands to reason if you get him out of the way, then it would be easier to catch her. But the problem is, once you catch him, she's not going to hang out for very long at all. She's going to move on. Something's wrong. He's not there, and her little spidey senses are going to go up, and she's going to vacate that area quickly. So unless you can catch her immediately after getting the male, you don't have a chance of catching her. So that is definitely not true. The next misconception is that in order to catch a bass off the bed, you've got to be right up on them and see the bed and see what's going on. Well, I can see when you're first starting out learning how to bed fish that it's helpful to be able to see how the bass reacts to your lure. So it may take some time practicing that and learning some of the nuances and some of the tricks of the trade on how to get them to bite. But your chances are much better of catching that fish the further away from that bed you are. They're on guard. They're on that bed for a reason, and they're guarding it. They're protective of that area, that territory, so they're already on alert. And you bring a big boat up right up on them, that gives them even more reason to be defensive and less reason for them to bite. So the further away from the bed you are, that you can still kind of see it, and you can still kind of see the bass moving around on it, the better your chances are of catching them.
Oh,
Weeds. Nope, that was a fish. That absolutely was a fish. He's right there. He's guarding bass. Coming after your lure. Here, you got it. There you go.
damn. He's an aggressive little thing.
Yep.
Dang. Got you, little guy. Come hither. Come hither. I'll put you back so you can continue guarding. There we go. Gosh. Thank you, little guy. Now go guard. Go guard away.
All right, here's another misconception that I like this one. And that is, if you're fishing a tournament during the spawn, then in order for you to win, then you need to be able to be really good at bed fishing because you got to catch a lot of fish off beds. It's not the case. I actually like fishing tournaments during the spawn because I know that's going to take care of, a half of the field or so, because they're all going to be fishing for bedding bass. The fish that are on beds are males. They've been working for quite a while, building nests, chasing down females, certainly not biting. And if they're protecting the nest, it's even longer since they've had a meal. They've burnt up a lot of energy, and they're not that big as a result. The big ones are the females, especially the ones that haven't spawned yet. So depending on the time of year, if the spawn is just beginning, I'm going to go be fishing pre-spawn fish. Sorry, pre-fishing. Pre-spawn fish. Those are going to be the bigger ones. They've fed up for the winter. They've got full of eggs. These ones are getting ready to spawn, but they haven't yet. So they're big and hefty. I'm going to be fishing for those. If it's late in the spawn, then there's a number of fish that have already spawned, and now they're recovering and they're feeding. They're more apt to bite. So, and they're getting heavy too. So I'm going to go fish those post-spawn fish. The other reality is if you're not very good at bed fish, I shouldn't even say not very good. I know some guys that are really good at bed fishing, but they'll spend a half an hour or longer trying to get a fish to bite. And sometimes those fish just aren't going to bite. It takes a lot of experience to know when a fish is going to bite and not bite a bed. I used to sit on a bed for an hour and a half or 2 hours sometimes. Now I know within the first few casts whether or not a bass is going to bite. But a lot of guys waste a lot of time working a fish that just isn't going to bite, and you just can't do that in a tournament and expect to win. So I just leave the beds alone during a tournament and focus on those pre-spawn or post-spawn fish. All right, another misconception about fishing spawning bass is that the best way to catch them is to get up on a spawning flat and just fan cast that area with fast moving baits, crankbaits, spinner baits, buzz baits, that kind of thing. As with every fallacy, there's a little bit of truth to it. And the fact of the matter is, if you're fishing especially smallmouth beds, and you can get your lure to go right over the top of that bed when they're guarding it, then some smallmouth will rise up and smack that lure to chase it off. But the reality is, you've got to get that bait right over the bed. Typically you don't, and especially with largemouth, what will happen is, if anything, they'll rise up and follow it just to make sure it's not a predator or something they need to be concerned about, but they won't strike it. So the worst case scenario, what you've done is you've alerted them to your presence. You've actually, they're on guard, they're protecting beds, and so now you're bringing something unnatural over them. Well, now their guard's up, and now they're less likely to bite. So you've basically ruined your chances of being successful. So no, fan casting an area, like I said, every once in a while you might be able to catch some buck males off a bed doing that, but it's not the best way to fish spawning flat. There we go.
Oh,
Okay. It's a little bit stronger fish than I anticipated. He's not that big, but
spotlight, good one.
yeah. That'll work.
We caught a little fishy boo.
Alrighty.
Look at the little fishy. Oh, look at him go. Run away.
All right, here's a fun one that I hear about a lot, and that is bass only spawn between 58 and 62, 63 degree water temperatures. Right in that zone, that's when the bass spawn. No, that's not true. See, the spawn lasts actually several months. Yeah. The first wave, if you will, is when the water temperatures sometimes haven't even reached 55 degrees yet. The low 50s to mid 50s, there's a group of bass, usually larger bass, and they'll spawn in deeper water, usually 10 feet deep, somewhere in that, 8 to 10 feet deep, maybe on top of some old stumps or something like that. The deepest I found them was in 19 feet of water, clear water. So the clearer the water, the deeper they're going to be. But he was in gin clear water, 19 feet deep. That was a big smallie. And unfortunately, I couldn't get him to bite, but boy, he was big. The female was even bigger. But yeah, colder water. It's not unusual to see some fish spawning when the temperature's in the mid 50s. The next wave, if you will, is the next full moon is usually when you get the big, larger population. That's when the water temperature's in the upper 50s, low 60s. That's when you see a lot of fish spawning. But it's not the only time, because then there's another wave, the next full moon. And that's when the water temperatures are in the upper 60s, low 70s. And there'll be another set of bass that spawn during then. Keep in mind the bass don't always spawn on a full moon. There's some that are spawning on new moons and in between. So there's always bass that are spawning throughout this entire period. So it's Mother Nature's way of protecting the species. You don't have just one spawn that happens at once. It happens multiple times throughout a 2-3 month period in different conditions to ensure that those species survive. You get some that actually hatch and make it through the next year. But this gets me to another myth that I see a lot, and that is bass only spawn once. No, that's not true. I talked about these different waves. Some of these bass will spawn 2 times during these waves, especially the females. They'll go, during any given spawn, the female will deposit her eggs on multiple nests, first of all. So that kind of debunks that myth right now. She's spawned multiple times across multiple beds. But oftentimes they'll spawn a little bit, say in that first wave, and then a month later she'll lay eggs again on some other beds, and then another couple weeks later she'll lay more eggs. So she's spawned multiple times, and some males will do the same thing too. They'll do it a couple, maybe twice during this time. So no, they don't spawn once. The other thing that's real important to keep in mind is once a female lays her eggs, she immediately starts producing more eggs, new eggs for the next season already. So she's already producing right away. There's no lag time. Often what I see is in the fall, there are some bass that actually spawn in the fall. This is pretty common, to be honest with you, because every year in our forums, we see people, they start hitting our forums and they show pictures of bass that have red tails, and they're like, were they spawning? This is really weird. It's fall, but why would they be spawning? Yes, they do. Bass can and do spawn in the fall. It doesn't happen a lot, but it happens enough that it's fairly common. I've seen them spawn as early as September and as late as Thanksgiving. I've caught fish off beds during Thanksgiving weekend. So they do that sometimes. Again, nature's way of protecting the species. So they can and do spawn more than once during the year. Another misconception that I hear a lot about is, man, I love it when it's spawned because that's the best time of year to catch a big bass. No, not really. That may be a good time of year to see a big bass, but not necessarily catch them, because during the spawn, that's when you see a lot of big females up cruising the shallows looking to spawn. And you may think, cool, they're catchable, but really they got one thing on their mind and one thing only, and that's to lay their eggs and get out of there. So they're not there to feed. They're not up there hunting. So they're kind of finicky and they're hard to catch. Not that they can't be caught, but they're difficult to catch. And because they are spawning, they're laying their eggs on different beds, they're losing weight and they're not feeding. So they're not at the biggest that they would be during other times of the year. Arguably the best time to catch a trophy bass is in pre-spawn. This is when they've fed up, they're big, they're getting ready to spawn, they're at the biggest they're gonna be. So in those earlier months, in the cooler water temperatures, late winter, early spring, that is really the best time to catch a big bass.
Oh! Wow. All right, there's a fish there and he got my bait.
I'll throw in there and see if I can find him. Did he take your bait?
Yep, he took the tail. He's more by that log. He hammered it. I thought he had it. I didn't give enough time to take it. There you go. Let's see if he's got my bait. Hell.
What the hell?
Is he wrapped on something?
I think he's wrapped on something. I can see him, but I can't get him. Oh, wait. What the hell? Yeah, he's wrapped on something.
Stick. Keep bringing him up. He's wrapped on a stick. Put the pressure on.
I got it. That just looks funny. He's right under the lip of the boat.
Okay.
See him?
Oh boy, I don't know if I can get that.
Whoa, there he goes. Oh, yeah, there he goes.
Jeez. I just touched the line. That's all I did.
That's all it took.
I didn't even grab anything else, so you got me soaking wet.
Come here.
Oh, he's garden fry. Holy crap, look at all these fry here.
Ah.
That's his deal.
You're just a little guy. Yeah, you weigh nothing and you're guarding. There you go, little guy. He's gonna swim right back to him. There he is.
Okay, another misconception that I hear sometimes is you gotta change baits a lot and you gotta change colors a lot to finally figure out what's gonna trigger that bite and get that bedding bass to bite. No, that's not true. Bedding bass are gonna, if they're gonna bite, that's the key, if they're gonna bite, it's gonna be about your presentation and location. It's really that critical. And it's a game of inches. Where you put that bait and how you present it to the bass. Sometimes you've got to cast way past that bed and let that bass forget about it. So just let it sit. And then every once in a while, give it a little movement and get it towards that bed until finally it looks like something natural making its way towards the bed. Sometimes that's the way to do it. Other times you can maybe take I've caught bass doing this, throwing a crankbait, a floating crankbait, cast it out upwind and let the crankbait float over the top of the bed and then give it a quick twitch. Other times you have to let the bait move across the bed and sit on the bed and give it a little pop. Other times you have to hit the bass with the bait. You know, it goes on and on, all these different techniques, different ways to get them to trigger, but you may use a different bait to get some of these different presentations, but it's not because you changed baits is why the bass bit. It's because you changed presentations because of the bait. Okay? Never have I ever seen color have anything to do with whether the bass bit or not. Color is just not a factor. It's basically if the bass thinks that this is something that's real and needs to be attacked or defended against, that sort of thing. That's why I use bright colored baits. The brighter the color bait, the easier it is for you to see it. and you can see what's going on, especially if you backed off and you're away from that bed and you can barely see the bed and barely see the bass, but you can see that bright lure. That helps you tell whether or not the bass is hit it or not. So don't worry about color. Pay more attention to your presentation and your location, and that is critical to your success. All right, here's another one that I see happen a lot during the spawn, is guys will say, hey, I saw a lot of empty beds today, the spawn's over, we've missed it. Not really. Now, there's some semblance to truth to this. If you see a lot of beds that are silted over, that aren't clean, then those probably aren't being kept up, and yeah, those have been abandoned, and likely the spawn is over. But if you see a lot of clean beds that just don't have a bass on it at the time, that doesn't mean the spawn is over. A lot of times the males will build a nest in stages. They'll build it a little bit in the morning and leave to go feed or something, come back later and build it some more. Or maybe they'll be gone in the morning, they'll come back in the afternoon to build it. And if it's an active bass that's bedding and spawning, those males, they got to go off the beds to go find a female and corral her and bring her back to the nest. If you watch any videos that show how bass spawn, this is the male will bump her and corral her and direct her back towards his bed. So you may come up on an empty bed, but that male's nearby, he's doing his thing. He's working a female right now. So it doesn't mean the spawn is over. The other thing too is these bass are very skittish. They know being shallow, they're vulnerable and they're very defensive. And if the water's clear enough for you to see the bed, it's clear enough for them to see you. And so if you're pulling up on a bed or you walk up on a dock or on a bank to where you can see the bed, they probably saw you long before you saw them, and they bolted out of there, they're gone. And they can see you from a distance and they're waiting for you to leave, so they'll come back to your bed, to their bed. You're just the only reason why they're not there at the moment. It's not because the spawn is over. So unless you see silted over, dingy, basically old looking beds that aren't upkept, chances are the spawn is not over just because you find empty beds. All right, so those are some of the misconceptions about spawning bass. I hope that helps you out. For more tips and tricks like this, visit bassresource.com.